Hello and welcome to another episode of Media Musings. And you know what? I was kind of hoping to make this yeah, sure. I'll throw you an invite, Jeff.
And Jeff does have some relevant history here, given he used to be a polytheist.
That's the main. That's part of the main reason. But yeah, I've got plenty of room because I actually paid for the streamer subscription, so I can get like 9 people in here.
Oh, that's quite fun. 10-person streams.
Yeah. But so also the noodle formerly known as Hissy, you're muted because you muted yourself, so I can't unmute you.
Oh, whoops. The noodle formerly known as Hissy, yes, that'll do. We'll answer to either. Just, noodle feels a bit more gender neutral, so we'll go with that.
Yeah. So, let's, at least until, Jeff gets in, let's, go ahead and do a quick, round of intros around the corner. You know, who are you, where you can be found, etc. Starting with either Bob or Sam.
Bob, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. I go by Bob of the Old Ways. You can find me on YouTube as Bob of the Old Ways and on Instagram under the same name, and I'm on Twitter at Old Ways Bob. And I'm just doing reaction videos to right now just to the TV show Vikings and giving kind of a pagan perspective on it.
I've heard things.
Yeah.
The first 2 videos were pretty good.
No, I mean about Vikings.
Well, yeah, as far as I'm aware, and from what I've heard, Vikings tends to lean more on the Anglo-Saxon sources.
I would like to point out that Viking was a job.
Our only Anglo-Saxon sources. But yes, Viking was a job, not an entire...
Yes, it was a job. But the show is called Vikings, so I'm stuck with it. It's not called Norse.
I'm just a pedant.
It's like naming a show Fisherman. Or...
I did point that out in my first reaction.
I just jumped in here and immediately Hissy mentions Vikings. Are you trying to trigger me or something?
No, Bob started it. Bob started it.
Anyway, I'm done with my intro. We can move on to the next person now.
Okay, so I am I'm just Sam Chaos on Twitter and YouTube. There's my avatar. And I talk about whatever I feel like talking about, usually kind of philosophical to religious stuff or social issues-y stuff on my YouTube. And I scream into the void on Twitter if you fancy that, but yeah. And that's me really. Any pronouns because non-binary.
Yeah.
Jeff, you want to go next?
Well, most people here know me already, and I'm fairly regular on these. But I'm Jeff, aka Godless Scummer, an atheist. But I was a polytheist for a couple of years. Back about between 5 and 6 years ago. Then I sort of became an atheist again. So, but yeah, I do have a certain love, particularly. I particularly have a thing for Norse mythology, and some people know I've got Mjolnir tattooed on my right arm. So, to give you a bit of an idea of where I was at with the polytheism.
Yep. And Noodle?
I'm Noodle, formerly known as Hissy. They them pronouns today, please. Although if you do call me she, her, I won't mind. So whichever you prefer. Currently, I'm going to say I'm a Hellenist, but I'm more Roman of the Numa tradition than straight up Hellenist.
Yeah.
When we're talking about polytheism. I'm somewhere between a Reconstructionist. I take as much of the old traditions as I can, and I try and keep the spirit of them in doing them for modernity, rather than just pulling something out of thin air.
I do
as
similar.
a historian, that's kind of where it all fits in.
Yeah. I've noticed a theme that most recons are historians in one way or another.
I mean, you kind of have to be.
Fair.
Yeah, it forces you to become one, whether you set out to be that way or not.
Yeah. But which came first, the historian or the recon?
I mean, for me, the historian came first because I've been.
Recon.
Well, yeah, I knew. Yeah, I know for you.
Yeah, well, interest in local folklore, then recon, then historian was the order for me.
Mm.
Yeah,
My
for
interest
me-
in mythology has existed for ages.
Did the
Yeah, me
recon
too.
link directly to the historian, though? Did you get into history looking for recon info, or was it just...
No, it was kind of a sequence of events, and then they all happened to link together afterwards.
Yeah.
Fair?
Yeah, for me, it was, I don't identify as a recon necessarily, but I find recon a useful lens to filter out bullshit. And I've always been interested in history and mythology.
Yeah.
So that's where I started, like ever since I was a kid. And, you know, I think the main reason I got into Dungeons and Dragons is because I was, you know, really into mythology. So I've kind of lived there my whole life.
See,
If at any point the conversation goes to bullshit, I have a fantastic book that is just bullshit over there.
Yeah.
oh no, if you ever buy a book that claims it's about Wicca or witchcraft from a generic cheap bookstore like The Works, don't bother.
No. No, even
And-
most of
and
the
I-
expensive
and
stuff you're
I
gonna try
have
out at least half
all the banners ready for things that regularly come up and will likely come up in this discussion.
Oh yeah, I meant to
Oh,
say,
yes.
have you worn the channel punching bag?
Wow, not even 10 minutes in, and we already brought up the channel punching bag.
I didn't want to be the one to bring up the channel punching bag, but
It was going to happen.
It was
Yeah.
going to happen.
It
We're
was
talking
going to
about-
happen.
Yeah, if you read those books and you can't see the reference to classical mythology on the page, it's because your finger's covering it.
Yeah.
it's not subtle.
It's really not.
For Bob and the rest of the uninitiated, I cannot talk right now. The channel punching bag is J.K. Rowling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting, because I've never seen the Harry Potter movies or read the books.
Yeah.
And one of the things I was going to do a reaction to was the Harry Potter movies.
Don't get me wrong, the books and movies are great. I just despise the author.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I personally
That's fair.
disassociate the author from the works for that reason.
Yeah.
It's like how I
Yeah.
can appreciate Lovecraftian horror and say Lovecraft's a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a big
like-
fan of the death of the author.
Yeah, if anyone has seen the news today, I can read Roald Dahl to a child and completely disengage that from apparently he was an anti-Semite. I found out from listening to the news this morning.
Sort of, I've heard, but I've not read enough
Apparently
into
the
it to
state
know.
apologised for it. I don't know.
I don't know.
And
That
so
Oh,
currently, everyone
I know-
in the chat is on the panel.
okay, that's not a good start.
Yeah.
well,
so-
I guess that's just us
I
chatting
did-
shit for people who watch it later. then.
I did ring, I did try to plug it today, but you know what happens to the group of people? They just turn it into a smutty Twitter thread.
yeah. But so thank you to anyone who may be lurking or watching in the future. And so this is an episode like half thrown together, but also half like several months in the making.
Yeah, because I feel like there's been a lot of episodes where I've been on and I said, "Oh, that's mythology," and you've gone put a pin in it.
No, well, no, it's more that. Oh, yeah. Hello, Ilya Moon. Glad to see we have someone who isn't on the panel in the chat.
Hi, Ilya.
But so as a sort of 1 year anniversary for my channel, we did a special episode on Good Omens, which reminded me of, well, basically because my first video was reacting to the evangelical petition to get Good Omens removed from Amazon or from Netflix, even though it's an Amazon Prime show. Which made me think that, while I was thinking on this, I figured this was a very good topic to have a conversation on, taking concepts and characters and stories, also whole stories themselves, and using them to make your own, using them to make content, usually,
Okay. Can I just...
Yeah.
Because I get what you're saying. At least 80% of the Western canon of literature is classical literature fan fiction.
I would like to point out now that The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is heavily based on mythology.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because Christian literature is definitionally mythology.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's also quite a lot of polytheist stuff in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as well.
Yeah.
That gets glossed over.
Oh, yeah, there is.
Yeah.
There's a shit ton there.
Yeah, as you can see, it was, overwhelmingly a blatant yes, but my, following is tiny and full of atheists. So,
yeah. And from a polytheist perspective, typically the approach that gets taken is if the gods inspired works about them, then they can continue to do so.
I think for me as well, I don't know about anyone else, but my gods can withstand even having a bit of fun poked at them. If they can't withstand that, why the hell am I worshipping them? Are they really that weak that they can't take it?
Pretty much.
Yeah. My starting position is usually that if it's a mythology that everyone, quote, everyone in the West is relatively familiar with, like Greek mythology, for example, it's okay to put a new spin on it or modernize it and change the narrative elements and stuff. But if you're using a mythology that most people don't know about and it's like going to be their first exposure to it, then you have a responsibility to be accurate within the confines of modern storytelling conventions.
Yeah.
That is actually a good point, because, for example, there is an African deity, I think Mumba, that part of his story is that there was the water on the earth and he threw up the sun, and then the sun dried up bits of the earth. But I've seen a lot of representations of that are way different. And so a lot of people don't necessarily realize that when they've heard the name. Or a lot of, First Nations tribes have stories that are wildly misrepresented. And so no one really understands what they are. And I think once there's an understanding in the general population of it, then it's okay.
Yeah. And if it's a living tradition, you have a responsibility to include or consult with members of that culture. And put them on the decision-making team and the writing team, if at all possible.
Yeah. And if you can, at the very least, Google it. Please, just Google it.
Yeah.
That's what the internet is there for. But I will say as well, with sort of putting mythology sort of on screen or into mass media, it's very difficult to measure when something becomes part of cultural understanding. So I think if you're doing something that's relatively new and you're dealing with something that, or when I say new, I mean new to the people outside of it.
Yeah.
I think you have a responsibility, maybe not necessarily to represent it accurately, because accuracy and mythology, that's a whole kind of words. But you do have a responsibility to indicate that this is a work of fiction, and to what extent at some point, be that by giving interviews, say you've made a film, as the director or the writer, you have a duty in the interviews to say, listen, we've taken from this, but actually there's a different, this is how we've changed it. You have a responsibility to, you know, in the extras on the DVD, things like that. You have a duty to try and get that point across. Because I think limiting a mythology to the people who follow it is very short-sighted. But also I think a lot of people who create media can do a lot more than they do.
Yeah,
I think quite a good example of someone who made it very clear that they were editing the mythology was in Percy Jackson. The author of that, Rick, did an excellent job of making sure that was obviously fiction, though looking back at it now, a lot of it is drawn from obscure bits of mythology that do actually exist.
I think with that one, with Percy Jackson, I have my issues with the Percy Jackson stories. Funnily enough, my issues with them are not with the use of the mythology.
I don't know a Hellenist who doesn't have some issues with it, one way or another.
Yeah, it's a bit. I mean, if it's Neil Gaiman did American Gods, Rick Riordan did Greek American Gods.
Yeah,
it is sort of the best analogy I can come up with for what the Percy Jackson stories are.
Yeah, but I mean, Neil Gaiman actually did rewrite a lot. Put it in his own words, but he did write all of the Norse mythology sort of stories out in a book that he released a few years ago as well. And he didn't do a bad job of it, I think. Yeah,
Neil Gaiman does an excellent job.
Yeah, I agree. He's a good example of how to do it right.
Yeah,
and Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett's Good Omens, when they were mentioned, actually, a lot of that has very fun bits from a couple of different mythologies, mainly Christian, obviously.
Yeah.
And some Semitic ones that I would have preferred if it was more obvious they were Semitic, but I doubt Neil Gaiman knew they were.
Yeah.
If I'm completely honest.
I'll say with Norse mythology, Neil Gaiman certainly does a better job than, say, I don't know, Marvel, for example, representing Norse mythology.
I will say as well, Neil Gaiman, Rick Riordan, because those are the two we're talking about, don't claim to be any sort of professional on this. They don't claim to have all the answers.
They make it very clear. They make it very clear that this is just a fun writing of fiction.
Yeah, I mean, even when Neil Gaiman did Norse mythology and released the book, he didn't claim to be the final word on it.
No.
He just said, this is my way of writing it.
It's just his way of telling the story.
In contrast, say, to Stephen Fry, who's released Mythos and wants us all to believe that he knows everything and this is how the stories went.
His beliefs about Hellenism, holy shit.
I started reading Mythos and I just couldn't. I've got it on my bookshelf and it's untouched. I can't.
I watched an interview where he tried to explain Hestia to the interviewer, and he couldn't.
How can you not explain Hestia? It's very simple.
Well, he tried, and the way he explained Hestia was as the goddess of the home.
I mean,
not exactly.
And it's like, I understand why you would get that impression if you'd only ever read, say, the Percy Jackson books. But if you've read the myths, you would need to understand that it was specifically the hearth and the home fire and the concept of what should go within the home as opposed to the home itself.
Yeah, and what nourishes the home of the people in it.
So can we conclude that Stephen Fry has only read the Percy Jackson novels?
That is highly
Maybe.
probable,
The
Frank.
thing is, isn't Stephen Fry a classicist though? Didn't he study classics?
I think he might have done that. Like, it actually shocked me how wrong he seemed to get it.
And again, you see how wrong he is, and then you see how wrong other people of his generation and class are, and it doesn't make a lot of. Quite
Don't
a few
worry about-
classicists who are.
Yeah. Don't worry about enjoying it, Micro Raptor. Just understand it's very wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can
I do
enjoy
think-
it. Don't get me wrong, but it is very wrong.
Yeah, I do
Yeah.
think-
Knowing the myths can make it harder to enjoy simply because I will nitpick, but you can still enjoy it perfectly fine.
Yeah, I
I
think
think-
it's important to point out too that what we call mythology is itself often a snapshot in time and a synthesis of
Oh.
many centuries of changing
Mm.
ideas
Yeah.
about the gods and the heroes.
And that's one of the things
Yeah.
where we mentioned reconstructionism, but then it becomes a question of what era are you reconstructing and from which city-state, because a lot
Yeah.
of these were city-states.
Yeah, like ancient Greece was not a unified country.
No.
Mm.
Most people, when they're
Oh.
talking about ancient Greece, they're either talking about Mycenaean Athens or the later period of Athens. Occasionally, they're talking about Sparta, and once in a while, they might be talking about Macedonia.
Or they might be
But
talking about Helene under Alexander.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Alexander the Great, Macedonia.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Shit, words.
Yeah.
Yeah. My brain blanked on that completely. My brain blanked on that. I should have known that one.
Yeah, no, but see, if we called him something, Alexander the Interesting would have done, at least we'd know something about the guy. Not that he was particularly interesting, to be honest.
No,
And an interesting
the thing
social life.
was- The thing with anyone named the Great, if they gave themselves that name in history, is that you know immediately they're a dickhead.
He didn't give himself that name, though. That name
Yeah.
was given to him.
Yeah,
I
it's
did-
just he's one of the few people with the Great that didn't try and give it to himself.
Yeah.
I don't think Alfred the Great gave himself that name,
No.
but
Alfred the Great is one of the few people who I will say was actually probably a decent person that has the Great after his name.
yeah.
Mm.
As far as the kings of that era go, he wasn't bad. Anyway, I'll say that, but
Yeah,
that's
there's
off.
a
That's
lot of
that's
things.
off topic. That's off topic.
Yeah.
right?
And I will say, like, not only taking characters and concepts from more well-known mythos, specifically, Judeo-Christian and Hellenic, is that they become very good shorthands
Mhm.
for what you're trying to, portray. Like, for instance, Good Omens having the two protagonists be an angel and a demon becomes a very good shorthand for your exploration of good and evil.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very obvious. This guy is supposed to be good guy. This guy is supposed to be bad guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's there, isn't it? It's like giving someone, if you talk about someone being Herculean, big
Yeah.
strong man. This
Mhm.
is the
Yeah.
what you get.
Yeah,
So
that's
they
the
have
example I
like
was
a
thinking of.
sports thing called the Hercules Trials or something that's basically a strongman thing.
Yeah, or a task being Herculean, it's,
It's
supposedly
difficult.
impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you even get like some more local things. Like around here you get local superstitions and shit, because old timey village in England.
Mm.
And there's various different superstitions, including things about I think I mentioned just before the show about the one of the local rivers, how you're not supposed to do anything holy if from a Christian perspective around there. And that is kind of a local thing that everyone knows that is drawn very much from mythology.
I think what we've got to, obviously what we have to remember as well, it's different with different kinds of mythology. When you look at the Greek, the Hellenic things, there's quite a fair bit of surviving, literature from the period that it's written in. Whereas
All written
certain
by
other,
rich people, but yes.
yeah, but yeah, and again, and with certain other mythologies, anything that was written down much later. Would say with like the Norse myths and certainly a lot of the Celtic mythologies.
Yeah. And
so
a lot of mythology was written down by Christians. We have to remember that pretty much all of Celtic and Norse were written by Christians.
The Eddas were written by
the Eddas.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was just about to say that. And even sort of a lot of texts we have from ancient Greece come to us because I'm going to say the peoples of the Persian area.
Yeah.
Because that's Arabs and sort of early Arabic cultures.
We're filtered through, filtered twice. Once through Islam and then once through Christianity.
Yeah, so it comes it comes filtered through Islam, and then because early Christians really didn't give a damn about writing anything down that wasn't relevant to their religion from the ancient world. So we get most of it filtered through Islam or what we found through material culture and what we've managed to unroll from Pompeii.
I mean, the thing is, we know as well with mythologies as well, is that stories, similar stories that travel between different mythologies as well. I mean, you can probably look. I mean, I forget what it was called now, but there's a story in Hindu mythology that's got some, quite few similarities to the Homer's Iliad, for example. So we go and say these things sort of, and then eventually, like you can get to the sort of modern day. Things say that the Bible is taken from other mythologies that were in that sort of area. Everyone will point out the Noah's Ark story, for example. I would
like to also point out that Christianity is just Semitic discount Platonism. Sorry. In a lot of regards, like the modern one. And I feel like Hissy possibly has some thoughts on that statement, but in an oversimplification, that is it. But a large part of it is taking Semitism and Platonism, and there's a lot of combination of it.
To an extent, yes, I have to be careful because, Platonism. My understanding of Platonism largely comes through the filter of having done a lot around Stoicism, which borrows heavily from the concept of the Logos and the One, which is essentially the Christian concept of God. That's where that comes from. We can trace that line. So yes, to an extent, the monotheism and the One from Platonism definitely,
and the concept of sin as well,
and the concept of sin definitely,
sure. And there's a lot of it drawn from the Semitism side as well. I was just making a comment that a lot of the philosophy around it, especially modern philosophy of Christianity, is drawn from Platonism.
Yeah, Lipsius has a lot to answer for, including making me read that damn book.
Yes.
Lipsius is a neo-Stoic for anyone reading. Unless you're Christian and into Stoicism, don't bother. Because he's an irritant. Go read Marcus Aurelius instead. You'll get a better view of it.
You will.
Well, honestly, it the more I learn about other faiths, the more Christianity looks like a Frankenstein of stitched together.
It basically is.
Yeah.
We've got to be honest.
I agree. That's
Christianity.
That's all Western culture.
Christianity essentially exploded as Rome was falling, and Rome had a good 1,000-year history at least of syncretism, and Christianity had to adapt to that in order to keep control.
Yeah, I mean, we were taught now we weren't told it in as many words, but I was actually taught in primary school that there was a certain level of Christian syncretism in order to convince the Celts to convert.
The Celtic cross. The Celtic
Yeah.
cross was the sun, and because they worship the sun, and we were told. I was told that outright. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were
Yeah.
told that
Saint,
they put the sun on it in order to convince the Celts that the sun and Jesus were the same thing.
yeah,
And
Saint
So they'd
Saint
worship
Bridget.
it.
I was
Saint
going to say
Bridget-
saints. Yeah.
Yes,
You got
a lot of
it.
saints are just direct drawings from gods. Now, Saint
Yeah.
Nicholas was probably sort of a real person, but a lot of the mythos surrounding Saint Nicholas comes from Odin or Woden.
Oh, yeah.
as it
I
was a
was.
Celtic thing.
You got there before me as well.
I mean, to be fair, with a lot of mythologies and a lot of male figures in most mythologies, you can trace to Odin if you dig deep enough.
Yeah.
Or at least aspects of Odin.
And the reason that amuses me is that within mythology, Odin is very much considered to have a slightly fluid gender. So the fact that it's always masculine people based off of Odin amuses me greatly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's not get started on Loki.
Yeah.
Oh,
Let's not.
Oh boy, let's
now,
please not.
as,
They
boy.
portrayed
As some-
Loki
as
accurately in the
someone-
Marvel movies. They would be very different.
as someone who used to engage in praxis with Loki, I have thoughts.
I bet you do.
Including the fact that Loki is basically a combination of several different forms of Odin. Interestingly,
Mm.
when you look at it, there's and the complexities of that are bizarre. But I think the thing that I was starting to get at, but didn't really say outright, I probably should have just done that, is saying that mythologies evolve, and sometimes you get other mythologies from prior mythologies.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think there's such a thing as, or if there is, we haven't found it yet, as an entirely self-contained mythology.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can even trace lines between the Native Americans and the Norse.
Yeah, because a lot of it as well, the thing is, in certain mythologies, there's always going to be certain archetypes that appear regardless of where the mythology is from, because certain experiences are universal.
So long as you don't stare too hard at Jung.
I knew you were going to bring up Jung. You had to, didn't you?
Well, I think that's why it's important, as to circle back around to something I said earlier.
Yeah.
To include, if it's a living tradition, like say Native American or First Nations people,
Yeah.
and if you're going to write literature and you are not yourself a member of that culture, you at the very least have a responsibility to make sure that your portrayal of what they currently believe is accurate.
And
And
their
So,
practice.
If
yes.
possible, you
But-
should include them, members of that community, creatives
Yeah.
from that community, in your own project.
Yeah. Though,
If
you
it's
know,
not, but if not 100% accurate, at least respectful of
Mhm.
it. I mean, obviously, when you're dealing with any sort of media, whether it be sort of literature or film. And I mean, this is the thing, and I could get onto this a bit later about how mythology is used in so many different mediums of media. But I understand that for story purposes, you could change a detail or two here and there to help with a story purpose, but not to the point where it's like completely disrespectful to especially to a culture that still holds those beliefs.
Yeah, and I think.
I have some rants.
We all have rants about that. Don't worry, we'll get there.
Oh dear.
But I think one thing as well with, just to give an example of when you're talking about live versus quote dead cultures, even when you're doing older cultures, like if you're going to make a film about ancient Rome, ancient Greece, please employ a historian, but more important than that, listen to them.
Mhm.
The first historian for The Gladiator walked off the set, and I'm not surprised.
I mean, for the book I'm writing, I'll be honest, I'm probably going to get my friend Aliakai to be my editor, purely and simply because they are a historian by trade as well, I think.
Yeah.
And they're a recon Hellenists, and the fact that my book I know has Hellenic influence is going to mean that any shit is going to get caught pretty quickly.
Yes, please, like, everyone needs a sensitivity reader. I don't care what your culture is or what culture you're writing about. I feel like that should be a part of the editing process for anything that has any kind of mythical or religious, although argument is whether those two are synonyms or not.
My take on that is no, but religion draws from mythology.
Fair. Yeah. It's more nuanced discussion than just either or.
And what I'm about to say might contradict what I said earlier, but I think it also depends on what you're trying to achieve with the creative work you're making.
Yeah.
So if you're making a movie like, say, Gladiator, and you're trying to portray ancient Rome under the Emperor Commodus relatively accurately, that's one thing. But if you're telling a story like American Gods, which isn't really about mythology, ancient mythology, it's about American, the American identity and the way it's cobbled together, then you can be a little more liberal with what you're doing.
I think,
especially if, like, I presume it's fairly well known that, like, the Lord of the Rings series, the mythology in there is heavily drawn from Semitism. But because it's not outright Semitism, I think some of the misrepresentations there are justified because it is a fantasy world.
Yeah, and I think if you're in a position where you're creating something that is obviously fantasy, like American Gods, like Lord of the Rings, you've got that leeway.
Yep.
Whereas I think something like Gladiator is presented as it's a film, it's there, very little obvious special effects, so people kind of absorb it differently. And the number of people I have as a classicist who say to me, "Oh, I've seen Gladiator," when I mention that I'm a classicist, and I'm just like, please,
no.
Before I even really knew much of the history of the period, I have to admit the first time I watched Gladiator and 5 minutes into the movie that they were borrowing sound effects from the old 1960s film Zulu did make me straight away realise that this isn't going to be good.
I do have to say as well, I've had people genuinely ask me the truth.
So, Semitism. Semitic religions are a group of religions, one of which is Judaism, another of which is the Canaanite polytheism. And they are a group of, I think, Mesopotamian. Don't quote me on that. Religions.
Yeah, Mesopotamian.
And
Arabian polytheism.
Yeah, and anti-Semitism is in culture that tends to mean anti-Jewish, but it's going to mean anti anything from that group of religions. And that's going to include Baal and Moloch and stuff. So a lot of Christians are anti-Semitic, and they don't think so because they think it's just the Jews. But it is the other cultures around it as well.
I will say I can see why Semitism has become defined almost as Jewish. And I think a lot of it is because Judaism, Judaism's the only one that survived.
I mean, I know a few Canaanite polytheists, but they're few and far between.
Yeah, and I'd be very surprised if that's something that they are, as in, they were born into and not something they found as adults in a reconstruction.
Their kids might, but they have very much found it themselves.
Yeah. Whereas, obviously, Judaism has an entire tradition of passing the religion down and everything else.
So Judaism is the only one that has been a surviving religion.
Yeah.
And anti-Semitism politically in the modern world is almost exclusive, I will even go as far as to say exclusively directed at Jewish people.
It is,
because Judaism is the only one that's currently in the mainstream.
That is true, but the average...
Except maybe Satanism, given that Satanism has heavy Semitic influence.
Right, but
would Satanists call themselves
theistic Satanists would.
Theistic Satanists definitely would,
Yeah, but the average, white supremacist doesn't know anything about Canaanite religion and doesn't care. Their hatred is not for the religious beliefs of the Jews. It's for their racist construction of what the Jews are. That has nothing to do with mythology.
Yeah, to be fair, you could have probably just stopped it at your average white supremacist doesn't know anything.
Yeah,
that's fair.
That's fair.
Fair.
In the chat, yes, Microraptor, they do seem to be pretty much anything that isn't them.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that could. Because I could definitely go off on a massive rant about how, should we say, certain political groups appropriate mythology, but I think that's probably best left for another time. To be honest. But bear in mind that I come from a Norse Heathenry sort of thing was my background. You can see the kind of what the issues I have with certain groups.
They do it with Roman reconstruction as well, and it's irritating. Apparently, there's a movement in Hellenic reconstruction, Greek Hellenic reconstruction, to make it only ethnic Greeks who are allowed to take part. There's a group that does this, and I'm just like, what's an ethnic Greek?
So welcome to we have now turned into the fuck folkism stream.
Yes, fuck folkism.
We always need to say that. Always.
I mean, literally my first video, I made sure to explicitly have fuck folkism up on the screen as text for a solid 5 seconds.
Hold on.
We're gonna get it on the stream now as well.
Keep chatting about your amongst yourself. To do it.
I think probably the worst thing is when you get like atheo-heathens who pretend to not be atheo-heathens, who just want the runic symbols for white supremacy. They are the worst.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I'll give you the best one. As I said right at the start, I am Roman tradition, Numa tradition, Roman polytheist. I say Hellenic because everyone's heard of that. And it's similar enough that it's mainly name changes and a few differences. And people recognise that. But the sheer number of people, I am in a lot of groups for Roman reconstruction, and a serious number of people who genuinely believe only Italians. And I'm just like, do you have any understanding of how broad the Roman Empire was? And the basic keystone of Roman religious culture was syncretism and assimilation and acceptance of outsiders.
Yeah, that is almost as bad as the people who I have found who've said that you're not allowed to be a Hellenist, or I've heard some people say pagan at all, unless you're a Platonist.
Do they understand Platonism?
And
no, obviously not.
And they try to claim they're not.
Summary of what Platonism is for anyone in the chat as well.
Yes, does the chat want a summary of Platonism?
Let's see, Microraptor, Never Again, and Ilya, if you're still there, do you want a summary of Platonism?
He's probably better doing it, or you'll get quite an angry summary from me. I dislike Platonism immensely.
I mean, you do it because you get quite an angry summary from me too. You can probably do it with less words than I can.
I'm not actually friends with any Hellenists who are Platonists, funnily enough.
Yeah, there's a reason for that. You don't have friends.
Yeah. So, since we've had...
we're getting yeses from the chat.
Since we've had a couple of yeses in the chat, so... Platonism, named after the philosopher Plato. Hizzy, stop me if I go too wrong or off on a tangent, but basically it's the concept that there is what's considered the one, and that is perfection, and then there are substrates that are effectively rings underneath that, and the gods are pretty much the closest you can get to being the one, which is considered perfection. And Platonists basically believe that we need the gods to achieve perfection and to worship the gods, and that you will... I'm only familiar with the group of Platonism that thinks you will be reborn until you reach perfection, but I know not all of them believe that.
Yeah, I mean...
but they basically think that you will be elevated by worshipping the gods and by these various different tenets. The two big things about Platonism is that they say if you don't understand Platonism, it's because you're not a Platonist yet. And if you still don't understand Platonism, it's because you're not holy enough or because you have not reached a high enough level of enlightenment to comprehend it.
Yeah, it's a real no true Scotsman fallacy going on.
Yeah.
I will say, yeah, I mean, as a philosophy, it's more around the concept of abstract objects. The idea that the one is an abstract object and is therefore not physical, doesn't exist on any plane that we can comprehend, but still exists. Now, that sounds really familiar.
Yeah.
And the one is this perfection that Sam was talking about. And the way I come across it, it's almost like worshipping the gods is a proxy for worshipping the one. So it's almost a form of pantheism. Or occasionally I've seen it compared to saints and God in Catholicism.
Yeah, and they say a big Platonist thing is that all of the gods exist in perfect harmony and they never squabble. And if you think they're squabbling, that's just because you don't understand them. That's one of the big Platonist things that I've heard, and it's great.
I would like to take one of these Platonists and hit them over the head with my copy of the Iliad.
Yeah.
And then if they don't listen, the Aeneid. And I'll just keep hitting them. I'm sure I've got a copy of Metamorphosis somewhere as well.
Oh, so you can just with the Odyssey as well, thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, I mean, because I've had Christians kind of take this Platonism concept of the one and claim that I'm actually worshipping the Abrahamic God by worshipping my polytheist gods because they are the ring around that God in this Platonist model.
I've heard a lot of Christians say that other gods are just angels.
Yeah.
And that the angels worship the one, which is Yahweh, which is funny to me because Yahweh wasn't even the main god in that pantheon that it originated from.
Well, he took over, obviously.
Yeah, through a protracted campaign of panthicide.
Yeah. Deicide, I think is the word you're looking for.
Yeah.
I mean panthicide.
Oh, like he killed the entire pantheon?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I do like Alikai's take that Yahweh is a trickster god who has fooled
that was something
billions of people into thinking he's the only one.
Yeah. That was me and Aliakai both separately came up with a similar idea and discussed that and kind of took the best bits from each other's ideas a little bit on that at one point, and it was just like almost certainly a trickster god, possibly where Loki comes in.
Yeah. Oh, I did not need that mental image. I did not need that. But I read the comment from Microraptor in the chat of whose pants, and then you said possibly where Loki comes in, and my brain just fired off. Because hell hath no fury like Hera scorned. Yeah. Because poor Heracles. I just
and I this is where I tend to go, okay, so Zeus sleeping around was a cultural norm and not necessarily a thing relating to actual Zeus.
Yeah, a cultural norm. But the fact that Hera is placed in the position of beleaguered wife is a bit.
That was very Athenian, wasn't it? So...
Yeah, I mean, you can sort of tell that all the ancient myths were definitely written by. Men. I'm gonna say men.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say men. Because although let's not get started on gender and sexuality in the ancient world, otherwise, because that's a totally different stream.
We could probably do a whole stream about the fact that Sparta was felled by the gays by accident.
That's the gay agenda.
Yeah, that's the one time the gay agenda caused harm was when they accidentally caused the annihilation of a city-state.
Yeah.
And to be fair, it was an accident.
But
yeah, And it was the gaze of the Spartans that caused it too.
Though I will say, like the one, like the main exception to the consensus of it's using concepts and characters from mythology is usually a good idea when you're doing it in an artistically what's the word?
When you have artistic license?
Just keep continuing with your idea, and the words you're thinking of will come to you.
Yeah, and artistically, with artistic integrity, etc., would be probably in the case if, like, specifically lifting from Native American mythology, because one, still still a living tradition. Two, it's a living tradition with a history of being corporatized, being
and it's also not a unified mythology. The people of Lakota.
It's also not a unified mythology.
Can we put that out there? We've got 3 polytheists and 1 former polytheist in the stream, and let me tell you something. Yeah. If you put you can take any 2 polytheists in the world. They can claim to be best friends or even twins, and I guarantee you they are practicing different forms of polytheism.
Yes,
there are as many versions of polytheism as there are polytheists.
It's like how there's as many denominations of Christianity as there are Christians.
It's we used to have the.
But we don't go to war over the differences.
No, we don't.
I used to have a little joke about some of the Wiccans, and one Wiccan is a Wiccan, 2 Wiccans is a coven, 3 Wiccans is a schism.
Yeah,
it's true.
And it's not wrong. I know lots of people who are Hellenists who follow the same city-state from the same time period and disagree on so much.
So I'm gonna step away for a second, because I gotta plug in my computer.
It's all right.
Yeah, and there's so many different forms of polytheism and so many different ideas that no one's ever gonna agree on everything with you. And if you've got a group of people who can honestly claim that they all believe the same things about polytheism, run.
You have a cult.
Run.
Yeah.
They should always be disagreement among polytheists.
Yes. Like, if me and Aliakai and Ocean and our friend Comrade didn't have at least one disagreement in a week, there'd be concern.
Yeah, I mean, you said you were a Hellenist, Sam.
Home base is Hellenism. I'm a bit all over the place.
Yeah, a little bit all over the place. But what you think of Hellenism, I guarantee you will be totally different to what I think.
Oh, yeah. And it'll be completely different again from my friend Comrade I mentioned is multi-traditionalist, and I think he does Roman and Greek separately.
See, I put them together because I look at the later Roman period, but I take the Numa traditions from the Roman period. Yeah. Also, please, just for anyone who's ever going to watch this in future or anyone who's watching now, if someone tells you they are a Hellenist, a Roman polytheist, or polytheist or pagan in general, please don't ask them if we eat babies. It's only on special occasions, the high holidays, and we season them properly.
Yeah,
that's what
pretty much.
Oh, you got. See, that's why polytheists and atheists tend to get along.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that we tend to take our beliefs just as seriously. We just don't take them as dogmatically.
Yeah.
And the other one would be that a lot of us are quite happy to say that other people's religions also exist. I believe the Christian God exists, just not as written in the Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah. I am a great believer in. Someone said it in the chat, and it's one thing I think Christianity kind of gets right. One of the main things I remember, having been raised in Catholic schools, was one quote we were taught in religious studies from the Gospel of Mark, and I'm sure Ring's going to give me the line and verse number in a minute. And the line goes, in my Father's house there are many rooms.
Yeah.
And in Christianity, this means it doesn't matter what denomination you are. You belong to God.
That's it's actually John. It's John 14:2.
There you go, John 14:2. I knew someone had come up with it. Now, it is a Platonist concept, but if you take that and broaden it out to say, listen, all religions have an element of truth to them. And if that's your truth, have at it is kind of where I'm at on it. I'm very much of the opinion, as long as you're not doing anyone else any harm,
Yeah.
If
it causes not harm, do as thou wilt.
Yeah, we can read.
Yeah, well, one line from the Wiccan Read.
Well, one line, because the Wiccan Read goes on for about 2 pages.
Oh, it's several paragraphs, yes.
Yeah.
And overall, I'd probably say I'm a very soft atheist. I'm only really a hard atheist in regards to Yahweh as depicted in the Bible.
Yeah,
that's
there
fair.
are Christians who don't believe in Yahweh is depicted in the Bible.
As someone who was at one point a Christian after being an atheist, that's basically where I was at. I'm like, the traditional depiction is wrong, but I was Christian in some sense of the term.
Yeah, I started out. I was an atheist for 20 plus years until I realized that I was only an atheist with regard to Yahweh, and I had never given serious consideration to animism or polytheism.
Yeah,
and that, along with contemplating the question of the hard problem of consciousness and its relationship to matter, is kind of what led me down the rabbit hole of where I am now.
A lot of people will assume that they understand paganism without having to do research. And I'm going to pick on John, the Godless Engineer, a minute, which I'm sure he won't mind. But
with all affection.
Odds are he'll probably never see this.
That's fair. I mean, he was going on the other day about how it's obvious that no one believes in Zeus because there is no man walking around throwing lightning bolts. And it was a call-in stream, so I called in to explain to him quite how wrong that was.
Oh, good. I need to go find your answer on that stream rather than getting into a rant now.
Then so basically, if you're not familiar with paganism or even a specific group of paganism, don't assume it's like anything else you've ever seen, please.
Yeah, I've lost count of the number of times I've talked to atheists who think that all concepts of deity are just versions of Christianity. And so those are the only arguments they
it's Christianity in a funny hat.
A lot of atheists think that because they thought that as Christians and they never bothered to research. And I know a lot of Christians think that because the amount of times I've had the conversation, no, I don't think you're going to my equivalent of hell. The closest thing you'll get is that you might go to Helheim, and that's where I'm going to.
It's like, I think the difficulty I have with Christians is I don't have a hell to send you to.
Nope.
We're all going to the same place, but if you happen to fight a good war, you might get the better wine. It's kind of my answer.
Does raise an interesting question I've always had that I've never been able to determine for any certainty. Is there a relationship between the names hell in Norse mythology and hell? And did that?
Yes,
did
there
that
is.
Transfer from,
yes.
Do you want to take this one, Jeff?
No, you better, because it's been a while since I've really read up on a lot of this, so I'm very rusty on stuff.
Okay, so a bit like Hades became a colloquialism for the afterlife within Helene, you had hell or Helheim become kind of a colloquialism for the afterlife within a lot of heathen traditions, and when the Christians came and invaded and syncretized a little bit, that was a bit of a thing that stuck, that hell was an afterlife thing. And then when Christianity became orthodox, half a century or so later, I think it was, they looked and went, okay, so what is this afterlife? And someone went, it's hell. And the name stuck, and they just edited the spelling.
Yeah, and kind of you can see where the Christian logic of it's an afterlife, but it's pagan, and pagan is bad, so it must be a bad afterlife.
Yeah.
You can sort of see where that thought process went.
Yeah.
It was also a bit of a thing to... Go on, sorry, Jeff.
I was going to say, also don't remember that hell is a goddess in the Norse pantheon as well.
Yeah, a bit like using Hades to refer to
yeah,
the
very similar sort of role to Hades, I'd say. But
yeah, Hell and Hades are both used like that simply because it was used to persuade people to move away from. Because like there used to be people who worshipped Thor and Jesus, and it was to try and knock the Thor bit off.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I, as well, in Hellenism, Hades is the place, but don't forget Hades is also the deity.
Yeah,
well, I think there's. I mean, I think.
Hades, if you prefer.
Yeah, I think with hell is within the Norse. I think there's a etymologically. I can't quite remember, but there is a distant word to an old Norse word that's similar to Valhalla, but it's not but it's got a similar sounding word, but meaning obviously Hall of the Slain.
Yeah,
but I haven't. Again, I'm so rusty on this stuff right now that.
I would also like to refer everyone to the works around Paradise Lost. All of that shit.
Paradise Lost is basically fan fiction that got adopted by the writers.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah. The Divine Comedy is a great read for Christians, especially if you tell them going in that none of this is part of official doctrine.
Yeah.
It's a self-insert fan fiction, and Baby wanted to meet his comfort character, I think, and go on a journey. It's a great read, if you can get past the language and what have you. And it's a vaguely interesting character study. But basically, everyone Dante didn't like is responsible for the state of the church as we know it.
Yeah, and it feels very. And first they came.
And it's. I would say, and this is a very broad generalization, and disclaimer up front, the Divine Comedy to me is almost to Christianity as the Aeneid is to Hellenism and Roman polytheism.
We could get into a nuanced conversation about that, but basically.
Yeah, again, that's why I said a very broad generalization, but it's political. It's a very politically minded, but it's trying to create a reality for a particular purpose.
Yeah,
and that purpose is largely religious.
It feels like somewhere between that and the works of C.S. Lewis. Like the works of C.S. Lewis were all very Christian works with very Christian meanings, even if they weren't part of the canon. And a lot of Christians love C.S. Lewis. Now, funnily enough, as a kid, I wasn't allowed to read C.S. Lewis because
you were in one of those houses.
Because
I was just a hair off from being in one of those houses. The only reason Lewis and Tolkien, the reason Lewis was allowed was because it's it's the most Christian allegory since Pilgrim's Progress.
Yep.
And the reason Lord of the Rings was allowed was because Tolkien was a Catholic, and there are Christian themes in it.
You do not get to say, oh, you were in one of those households to anyone. You weren't allowed to watch Mary Poppins.
I wasn't allowed to watch Mary Poppins.
Yeah. No, yeah.
So I think Ring is allowed to say that in this situation.
I will say I am allowed to say it, at least to Sam, because Sam was from what I
Pentecostal.
from that comment, Sam was in the you're way more, you're even more extreme than my upbringing was.
So
in the circles around perfection, Sam was one closer than where you came from.
Yeah.
Is this what we're saying?
I basically to this day there are family members who don't like and probably still pray for the fact that I play D&D. My mum has lightened up a bit because my stepdad plays D&D, so she doesn't mind now. But some of my family members do. When I told my nana,
Mary Poppins was too witchcrafty.
See, my mum despised Mary Poppins on principle, but it was too witchcrafty. It's the same reason I wasn't allowed to read Harry Potter, in case it made me a witch. That didn't help. I'm still a witch.
In case Harry Potter made you a witch, because watching Grey's Anatomy made me a surgeon.
Yeah.
Well, the thing, you've got to understand that, that some of Mary Poppins is, I'm sure, is used in theistic satanic rituals. I'm sure they stand around the supercalifragilistic.
I'm suspicious of anyone I see. Any woman carrying an umbrella is now a Satanist.
Bedknobs and Broomsticks is another fantastic one that I only watched like a couple of months ago.
I saw that as a kid and I loved it. I had an obsession with it for a while.
I've never seen Bedknobs and Broomsticks. I've never seen The Black Cauldron.
I watched The Black Cauldron in the cinema. Okay, that came out.
But for some reason, we were allowed to watch Aladdin.
I mean,
I'm going to keep my commentary on that to myself because I have a theory as to why, but I like to keep the family peace.
I was allowed to watch Disney stuff as a kid, and because I have 5 younger sisters, I ended up watching some of the Barbie shit. And honestly, some of the stuff in there was way weirder.
Yeah.
But
the Barbie stuff was toxic gender roles as opposed to anything else. So
yeah, I mean, there were dragons in some of the Barbie stuff, which would have freaked out my family in most other things except the Bible.
Yeah.
It does. All this just make me think about the relationship between storytelling and mythology and politics, because to my mind, a lot of what mythology does is reify the values of the culture that produced it.
Yeah,
or
that's literally what the Aeneid was for.
Yeah, or
shape
and determine the morality and the political identity of the culture.
I was just thinking of something you said about dragons in Barbie. I'm thinking, hold on, you're very, very attractive blonde woman with dragons. I know where Game of Thrones got this shit from now.
So,
Game of Thrones is a Barbie fanfic. Got it.
That is a part established.
Mythology, culture, religion, and politics is possibly why evangelical Christians are so uptight and picky about anything regarding Christian mythology being depicted, unless it's a blatant Bible story.
Can I ask to the other polytheists in the stream, how does your polytheism influence your politics, or does it at all? Because I find, from a moral point of view and an ethical point of view, probably a little bit, because you can't really study ethics and polytheism and not be impacted in your politics by it. But on a broad scale of my polytheism has nothing to do with my politics.
Can I know I'm not currently a polytheist, but can I take that one first?
Oh yeah, go ahead, because you used to be a polytheist and it would have affected at the time.
But I'm going to say no, because I was a raving trot when I went into polytheism, and I'm still a raving trot when I've come out of it. So
you're still a raving trot now, aren't you?
Yeah. So that's probably not really with me. No.
I'll take it next, and then I need to disappear for a sec, but I can still listen.
Okay.
So the answer is yes, indirectly. Because becoming pagan was my path out of Christianity the second time. Because I was a Christian twice. I did Christian, atheist, Christian, pagan.
There's a joke from The Simpsons about a president coming to mind right now.
And so I became, as I was becoming more pagan, I slowly turned into what I call a chaos leftist. I will quite happily take any stable position that looks after the people, but I've found all of those positions tend to be in anarchism, syndicalism, communism, and socialism. And so it's slowly turning me into a commie. Just being pagan, because being pagan by virtue means you have to think for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I would say for me, the answer is yes, but not in the sense that it determines any of my political beliefs. It just, for me, it just means I'm required to be part of a community, and that necessarily involves political activism and political decisions. And I can't, I mean, I practice primarily Celtic polytheism, and I would identify myself at this moment as an animist. So for me, being part of community means being part of the world. There's no other way to avoid it, or there's no other way to do it. I mean, so it wouldn't necessarily decide what my political beliefs are, and it hasn't necessarily changed any of my political beliefs, but it has reinforced my sense that I need to be part of the political process.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I think I'm gonna jump back on and say that because with my polytheism introduced me to Stoicism, which, while I don't particularly agree with the metaphysics of Stoicism, a lot of it is about getting involved, and everyone is interlinked, and you have to play your part.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a very similar concept to what you've just described there, I think, Bob.
Yeah, definitely.
I
should say for the record that I am a leftist, so, and I've been one for most of my life. So that hasn't changed. It in some ways, being on the left politically was my gateway into exploring polytheism rather than the other way around.
Yeah, I'd give a similar answer. I mean, I'd give maybe a similar answer to it, but to that, a big part of it for me, though, it also happens to be that I was in a relationship with a woman who was, at the time I met her, she was sort of just coming out of Christianity and in going down into the route of polytheism herself. But I think, but because I had maybe a bit of more of an open mind towards polytheism than I certainly had towards Christianity, that maybe I was a bit more receptive to it. So I was just very fascinated with a lot of it. But strangely, it was really weird that when she started going down the Norse path, initially I knew far more about her than about Norse religion and Norse mythology than she did at the time. Although I think if I speak to her now, you know, she would have probably more knowledge than any of us put together. But that's kind of a bit of my weird journey involving.
I do think the mentality that calls us towards being leftist and open to those ideas is very similar, if not the same mentality that calls us to being more open to polytheism.
Yeah.
Because you have to go into it with an open mind and with a view to there are certain truths, and these truths are that human beings are very interlinked and with the world, which I think it is, regardless of any polytheist approach, you understand that you rely as much on the world as you do on other people, and that's a big part of it. Unless you're a folkist or a fluffy, well, even the fluffy bunnies are very.
But I mean, but I think generally a lot of the time is that when you journey into polytheism, it is very different from if your main exposure is to something like a Christianity or something that is a religion that actively go out to convert and draw more people in. That's a big part of their thing. We must convert everyone. Polytheists, I found, generally you seek them out. You don't. It's I think this is perhaps why in general they're a bit more tolerable to me, because of initially and because they're not proselytizing to anyone. But again, as he points out earlier, trying to get a group of polytheists to actually agree on anything, for any length of time is.
I will say, I think, especially in modern times when they are not the majority religion, polytheism is not for anyone who's comfortable emotionally, or polytheism is not something you're going to find if you are perfectly comfortable being, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. You have to be questioning something. You have to have that attitude of, something has to feel slightly wrong about the majority, not the majority, but the culture in power, for you to find polytheism, because you have to go looking for it.
Mm-hmm. And
it's not something you're going to stumble over accidentally and find yourself knee deep in.
And seems like the root of conservatism is maintaining the status quo, which means culturally, most conservatives will align with the majority religion in that region.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Even if they don't believe in it, there's a lot of. I was watching an interview with Richard Spencer, the white supremacist leader, the other day, and he said he's an atheist, but he doesn't believe in the separation of church and state because people have to be taught to believe something, and he identifies culturally as a Christian, even though he doesn't believe in any of the doctrines, but he supports all the right-wing fundamentalist movements.
That to me sounds like someone who just wants a method of control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly what he said.
That's
I have found that even some conservative atheists seem to think that Christianity contains good messages because it became popular.
Mm-hmm.
That's like saying that. I mean, for me, with Christianity, it's especially when you're looking at it as a control mechanism. When you're looking at it as a control mechanism, from that point of view, it's just the Santa Claus story for adults. Educate people, and you don't need to control them.
I think that's what's it. I mean, what's it? I don't know if this quote's accurate, but that whole Napoleon thing. Was it religion's excellent stuff for keeping people quiet and keeping the poor from murdering the rich? I'm probably got that quote wrong, but it's something along those lines.
I would argue that in bread and circuses, Christianity tells everyone that they should have bread and to imagine they have bread, and then is their circus.
Mm.
Now we've kind of wandered a bit from the topic.
Yeah,
we have actually. Yeah.
Yeah, so I will say that it does. There, part of a lot of the reason why I, wanted a polytheist, majority panel is because it seems to me that there is very much a double standard in regards to taking from mythologies for, the production of media, in that everything's fair game unless it's Christian.
Yes. That tends to be
I'm
true.
going to...
Everything is fair game to put in any light you want except Christianity.
Yeah.
I'm going to niggle a bit and call for some... I would say anything is fair game as long as it's not Abrahamic.
That was where I was going to go with that as well.
Yes, actually, fair point.
Christianity.
Although I think Judaism is becoming more and more fair game, which concerns me.
Yeah.
Yes, and Islam is not fair game, but it is fair game depending on your politics, but shouldn't be.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I was
Christianity
gonna say.
Christianity and Islam are the two that are considered not fair game to do anything with.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah,
interesting to contemplate why. See, it's because there would be real world
Hey.
consequences,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that is sort of the wrong way of doing it right.
No.
Because you have to consider that these are beliefs held by real people. So when you're doing it to a minority faith, like a Native American tribe's mythology or something, you should be mindful of the fact that you're going to harm them if you
Yep.
do,
Yeah,
do
I
it
think
wrong. Because
whenever
the
you're-
reason that studios are averse to offending Christians and Muslims is because many of those people will be aggrieved enough to cause trouble in the real world for you.
Well,
Yeah.
And that's the
feel like
wrong,
the other
that
thing
should-
is
that's the
that
wrong
people-
motivation. But
People also don't understand anything except Christianity and Islam a lot of the time.
Yeah.
yeah.
I
well,
will
I mean,
say as well, I think the problem with using mythologies, sort of to draw from bits of what everyone's just said in the last couple of minutes, the problem is that people creating media consider what harm might be done to them if they draw from the mythology rather than what harm they may be doing to other people.
Yeah.
And it should be the other way around.
exactly, yeah.
And
well,
that also, is why I decided to do this stream, because it is very much, it's very much my ethos, as I said last week, is I try to take the Uncle Ben perspective when it comes to speech. Is, with great power, there must also come great responsibility.
I think the big thing with politics,
advocate for responsible speech.
Yeah.
I was just going to...
Go on,
sorry.
Jeff.
Yeah, because I was just going to add something that, well, I mean, a very good example of something that, I don't know, I'm a little older than some other people from the UK on the panel, but they may remember this story. Was the with the controversy with Muslims over a novel called The Satanic Verses, and the author Salman Rushdie.
I'm not old enough to remember it, but I know the story.
The story, yeah. Well,
I am not old enough to remember either.
Yeah, but
I know
there was there was a fatwa put on him by the Ayatollah Khomeini over that book.
Isn't that still active?
I have no idea if it's still active.
It is still active,
think
but
the
they've kind of
thing-
let it go because they had other things they got mad about since then.
I
But
think the thing
Salman
is
Rushdie
that
was forced to live in hiding for many, many years because there were people actively trying to kill him.
I think the thing is that if you want to understand Christianity or Islam, you can pick up a book on Christianity or Islam from a bookshop.
Yeah.
With polytheism and paganism, if you pick up a book from a shop that is about polytheism or paganism, especially if it's a colourful book, you're going to get bullshit like this.
Oh, what do I have? Did you see the little grey book in the works for £3 Wicker with the little flowery circle on it?
Oh shit,
I had that at one point. I had that at one point. I read it once and threw it away. I didn't even donate it to charity. It was that bad.
The thing is that this, in trying to be Wicca for dummies, misexplains where Wicca came from. They say that
most Wiccas don't know where Wicca came from.
Because it says Wicca is ancient when it was created relatively recently.
1930s, wasn't it? Created
50s.
50s. 50s is the earliest version of it. 70s is the earliest modern version of it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, when there's so much misinformation around it, it's really easy to misunderstand it, especially when Wicca are the biggest group. Like, don't get me wrong, Wicca helped us become mainstream. But Wicca is also discount pagan Christianity, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, it's like, oh, what cost?
Yeah, I think it's a valid path for, if it works for you, and
it's
it gives you
absolutely
meaning to your life. It's awesome, and
I just dislike how exclusive it is and how much everyone else all the Wiccans try and fit everyone else's traditions into theirs.
Yeah, no. A perfect example of that, and I'm going to tell this story because it matters. I was in a conversation once with someone who claimed to be Wicca, and we were discussing methods of cleansing, rite and ritual, that kind of thing. And this person genuinely said to me, with no understanding or hint of irony, the words, "Did you know the ancient Greeks used white sage smudges?"
I
responded with the words, "Please explain how that's possible when they didn't know the Americas existed as a landmass and white sage only grows in America."
I'm just going to turn my camera on so you can see what I'm doing at the moment.
Yeah.
Hold on.
This devolved into a 3-day argument on Facebook.
Yeah, it's pretty much just this.
To which they genuinely claimed that they had proof that the ancient Greeks used white sage. I was like, no, they didn't. They used dragon's blood resin. And this person argued with me. Also, and I was just like, please show me an ancient source. And they sent me some random link to a Wicca blog. And I was like, that's not a source. Try again.
Oh, sources. People, learn how to source, please.
This should be something that's taught in schools. I don't understand how schools can teach history and teach the Second World War honestly, every year for 5 years in a row and don't teach people how to look at a source.
This is a bit of a diversion from the topic, but it is linked and it loops back round in a second.
Oh, okay.
But, my little sister is being home educated by my mum, which is going to cause some issues, but I've got myself into a position where I'm allowed to do some lessons with maths and stuff with her. And so I'm going to teach her proper historical research such that later in life, when I say to her, right, listen, you know how I taught you how to research history? Let's do historical research on Christianity.
That's a good plan.
Yeah.
I like that plan.
And so because of this, that's going to help her understand where mythologies came from, including Christian mythology. And I think that's a sneaky way I can get it past my mum that I am turning my little sister into a heretic. She's currently like 3, so I've got some time.
Yeah, you've got time, let's be honest. She's still on like the times tables at the minute, so you're good.
Yeah.
She's still learning to count to 10, she's 3.
I'm going to step in here and do a little bit of defending.
You just said dragon's blood. I had to.
Yeah.
You're going to step in a minute. What, Bob? Sorry.
I'm going to step in and defend the Wiccans for a little bit here.
Oh yeah, the Wicca is fine.
Yeah, no, I absolutely will say with Wiccans, I do not argue with anyone's path. Just some Wiccans I find try and drag me onto their path, and that's what I have a problem with.
Well, I was going to defend the fact that Wicca has done whatever its
Wicca's done a lot.
And demerits has done a lot of the heavy lifting for helping to normalize pagan.
It has, and for all I complain about it, Wicca has been overall a good thing, I think.
And getting back to the mythology, portrayal of mythology in movies, the movie The Craft did a huge amount of heavy lifting culturally for young women, at least in the United States, to explore spiritual paths outside of patriarchal Christianity. And
the channel Punching Bag arguably even helped a bit in terms of normalization of talking about those subjects.
Yeah. But the difference is that The Craft was more accurate in terms of its portrayal of Wicca than J.K. Rowling's portrayal of anything is. But, a lot of young women saw that movie or women who were young at the time saw that movie and then went to look for what they saw in the movie and found it in the real world.
Yeah.
And it helped them expand their political and cultural consciousness a great deal.
Yeah. Now, is Wicca a double-edged sword that occasionally means that one of my friends who grew up Christian will message me asking how to do a love spell? Yes. Does it help mean that when I say I'm pagan to someone, they don't freak out and try and stab me? Also, yes.
Yes. And so it's a double-edged sword, but one side is a little bit blunter than the other. I'm grateful for that.
But it speaks to the success and the cultural normalization of Wicca, that when you tell people you're a pagan, they immediately assume that you're a Wiccan.
Yeah.
And it has opened up the conversation a bit more.
Yeah,
so it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. I mean, going back to sort of the 70s when the depictions of polytheism in media were people slitting throats and drinking blood and all that.
Yeah.
In that sense, Wicca has really softened.
Oh,
I'm not worried that people are going to think. I'm not worried that people, even if they do say, "Oh, do you murder babies?" and thing, they mean it jokingly. It's not meant with the same kind of fear.
I mean, in college, I was sat next to a Muslim in computer science, and I'd brought some of my witchcraft stuff in, and I started doodling, and he asked if I was trying to curse someone.
Yes, because polytheism in Islam is shirk.
But he didn't try and avoid sitting next to me, which is the progress.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So, last topic, or last subtopic before final thoughts. We'll go ahead and go around real quick. In regards to media depicting and or lifting from mythology, best and worst examples.
Oh, best and worst.
Define best and define worst.
Do you mean favorite and least favorite, or best and worst impact, or what?
Well, okay, so what in my for my best, I'd probably say Good Omens, for how it uses Judeo-Christian mythology to explore its themes, and how using that really elevates the work. It's a good use of concepts from mythology for the piece of media.
Okay, my answer for best then is obscure and bizarre in terms of it being used for this frame of reference.
Yeah.
Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can see what you're getting at.
And it's obscure and bizarre, and it doesn't really come into it, but in terms of the lore behind it, it's a really nice setup, and it doesn't detract from any mythologies at all.
Yeah.
I don't know where to go on this. I mean, because like at the beginning when I jumped into the stream, I mean, Vikings was being mentioned, but my main issues with that are not so much mythology, but historical issues rather than mythology. There's my main issues with that show. I mean, I guess I don't know. I don't necessarily think this is that this has been a bad thing. But I think I'll just say it was a little bit frustrating a few years ago when I was a polytheist, and I'd tell people that I worshipped Thor, and they said, "What, the guy for the Marvel films?" I don't know why. That got a little frustrating, because to a lot of people, that is what Thor is. That's what Thor and Odin are, something from the Marvel universe. But is it particularly a bad thing? No, it's not.
It's a little bit frustrating at best.
It's a little frustrating, and I'll just be totally honest. Yeah, Stan Lee was not necessarily like the greatest for looking into mythologies that he was writing about. For as pointed out in an example, when Kevin Smith interviewed him and asked him about the name of the hammer, Mjolnir, and Stan Lee just said, "I think that's just a made up word," and it's like, and you're like, okay, so either you'll take it, which is either that feeds into the conspiracy theory that Stan Lee wasn't writing as much as this as he claimed, or
and I mean, Kirby just wanted to draw new gods. He didn't want to draw from older mythologies.
Yeah. Also, all words are made up.
Yeah.
Yep.
At some point,
If you go back far enough.
The point being, he didn't know that was the name of the hammer from ancient, but I don't know. I mean, in best, I don't know, because again, what's one of my favorite mediums for a lot of the Norse and Viking stuff, and it is music. If people notice, like I've got a Bathory T-shirt on here. I do like a lot of the way that it's been used. However, that being said, some of the bands, again, as much as I like the art, some of those like metal bands that do music around this stuff are problematic as hell. So maybe it's you know, it's a double-edged sword, but it's mainly more of a fact that I get a lot out of the art itself rather than.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, from a point of view of depicting the mythology or depicting the religious practices, I have two that I have major beef with. I've already mentioned one. I've mentioned Gladiator. The reason I don't like the way Gladiator depicts the religion is because it's basically Christianity with a funny hat. And I can't do with it. If it's polytheism, make it polytheism. If it's not, don't.
Yeah.
That's my major, because that focuses more on the practices. And I can see what they were trying to do. I can also see how they failed miserably. So I kind of have... I'm ambivalent towards Gladiator.
Yeah.
My main beef about the depiction of mythology or mythos and folktales as well is Disney.
That's fair.
Our secondary.
I haven't even got there yet. I haven't even got to the channel punching bag yet.
No, I'm saying Disney, at least in regards to me, is kind of a secondary channel punching bag.
Yeah. Disney, okay, don't get me wrong, some bangers of of music in there, great animation, but if one more person tries to tell me that the Disney Hercules is an accurate retelling of the myth, I am going to start wringing necks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen Aaliyah Kai's latest video on that subject?
I haven't. No.
Oh, I still need to go back and watch that. Actually.
Yeah,
excellent.
I also need to put that in the description because it's a great. It is definitely a great watch.
Yeah. The story with. It's all out of sync. It's just a nightmare. Don't get me wrong. Love the tracks. Love the choir in the background. That's a brilliant depiction of a what's the word I'm looking for?
Great chorus.
Chorus. That's the word I'm looking for. Brilliant depiction of a chorus, but the actual myth itself is terrible. Please don't believe it. Go read Robert Graves. Go read Edith Hamilton. Or something, please. I would rather you read Stephen Fry than took that as any kind of accurate. Rowling, I kind of give a pass because she isn't claiming that she's telling the mythical story. She's just yanking elements from it.
Yeah.
Which I can give a pass. Disney is claiming it's telling the stories.
So
that I have beef with.
That's fair. I would go for Disney, but I have one that I despise more than that.
Yeah.
There are a few in this group, but I'm going to pick out the one that I think probably did the most harm. Pet Sematary.
Which one? The movie, the book, or the most recent movie? There's been two movies and the book.
Take your pick, but I'm talking about the book personally.
Yeah. Okay.
Dealer's choice.
Yeah. It's just especially just any representation of the Wendigo in media. I don't know, because the word was never used in the show, and believe me, I've watched the episodes enough times. I don't know who came up with the idea of calling that thing with antlers out of Hannibal a Wendigo. Stop it. Also, that thing from the pilot of Supernatural, stop it. No, don't touch Native American culture. People don't understand it enough. Don't touch it.
And while we're at it, leave golems alone as well. You don't know what you're talking about.
No, golems are their own whole thing. But still, it did so much harm.
Yeah. So much harm. That Supernatural episode, I think Supernatural is one there that And the problem with Supernatural is it almost in text claims to be an authority, which is definitely a problem. I have problems with things that claim to be an authority and then aren't.
Yep.
And Disney and Supernatural are way up there on that.
Yeah.
Fair. I just think in terms of cultural destruction, there was a lot of animosity towards Native Americans caused by Pet Sematary specifically, but it is like a group of things there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for me, I would say the best in current media that I can think of for me would be American Gods. Not so much because it's necessarily accurate, although in some ways it's more accurate than, well, it's definitely more accurate than Marvel.
Yeah.
But because of what it's trying to achieve by using those myths in that way, it's really, for instance, I think it's really awesome that Odin in that show is named Mr. Wednesday.
Yeah.
I
haven't seen the show. I've read the book.
Great,
I should read the book again.
Yeah, because that very subtly drives home the point to the average American viewer that they are, in some ways, they are still living in a pagan world.
Yeah.
The names of the days of the week come from pagan gods.
I just want to throw out there, Christmas trees are not pagan.
Yeah.
Yeah, no one's arguing with you.
Yeah, no one would argue that point,
I think. That's the one thing that everyone seems to think is pagan that isn't.
Yeah.
And then
there's a lot of pagan things in Christmas, but not that.
And then people will say wedding rings are Christian specific.
No, they're not.
And I'll just be like, stares in understanding Cometicism.
Yeah. But I think for me, so to continue with what I was saying about American Gods, I think it helps viewers of that show or readers of that book who may not have previously been aware of just how much of our civilization is rooted in paganism and pagan beliefs and pagan ways of thinking. Now, as far as worst depiction goes, in terms of accuracy, I would say Marvel.
Yeah.
For sure. But I don't think that's had a terrible negative cultural impact. As for the worst impact culturally, I would say for me it was probably the X-Files, which I've been rewatching lately, and every season has multiple episodes about the scary, spooky, native, mystical curse, or the voodoo curse.
I've not actually seen the X-Files, but that sounds bad.
Yeah, a great deal of the horror in the X-Files depends upon the othering of indigenous people or people of color.
Oh, that's shitty.
Their mystical traditions.
I don't like that. Especially
shows like that, or Supernatural, which does that a lot too. Is probably worse in terms of its cultural impact on real world people.
Now, I'll need to get confirmation from the ex-Catholic. But
what are you about to say that I'm about to glare at you for?
I would say Constantine is possibly another good example.
The movie?
No, I'm talking the TV show.
Okay. I really liked that show, and I like that character a lot.
I've not seen that, actually, so I can't comment.
And that being said, I do realize that Constantine takes more from, the Hellraiser comics than from actual, Catholic mythology.
Mm-hmm.
But...
Yeah. Yes, I would say. I mean, it takes most things in media take from the extremes of any given mythology.
Yeah.
Because that's what's interesting. Scandal sells.
Yeah.
Weird stuff sells.
There was one.
It's better than most.
Do you know what? I stepped over a couple of minutes, and there was something I totally escaped my mind. But one of the absolute worst representations of like pagan beliefs ever was an old 1970s film. Anyone guess which one I'm going to say?
The Wicker Man.
Absolutely. I mean, to be honest, to anyone who's a polytheist who watches that, it's comical. It is absolutely comical.
That makes me want to amend my answer.
Yeah, no, I feel
was just reminded of the movie Midsummer, which also did a horrible way.
I've not seen any of these, so I've had to go off what I know.
I would say I think Wicker Man, to me, my gut emotional reaction to Wicker Man is probably the same reactions Christians had to Life of Brian. I'm just like, what is that?
But
it wasn't the satire, and that annoys me.
I don't remember what it was, but I remember reading something about a show, the premise of which was like an exorcist from Wicca, and that just made me want to strangle something.
But
I'm going to say sorry for Wicca, because for some of the good ones, depictions of how the religion is practiced, HBO's Rome, funnily enough, is very good, because it's just there in the background. It's not scandalized. For sort of positive depictions of polytheists and Wiccas and those who go into witchcraft, believe it or not, I think Buffy is a positive representation to be taken with a grain of salt.
Yeah,
but did a lot for softening the opinions of people on those who have practices that it draws from.
Yeah, New Age stuff, much as I despise a lot of it, has done us some good.
And I mean, again, this not a series I'd say that necessarily did any real damage, but just laughable, and it's not meant to be taken seriously. But there's two TV series that in the 1990s set around Greek mythology: Hercules' Legendary Journeys and Xena Warrior Princess.
Didn't do any damage, but didn't do much good either.
No, the trouble is, I still can't get the image of Aphrodite as a Valley girl out of my head because of that series. And I know that is a totally wrong thing to have.
I mean, to be fair, Aphrodite's behaviour, Valley girl, you can kind of see where they were going with it. It's little bit.
I don't know that I've ever seen a decent representation of Aphrodite in any media, so I don't blame them.
I mean, okay, to be fair, it's not meant to be taken seriously, those shows, but
also the depictions of the Greek gods in that one episode of Star Trek, the original series.
I've not seen it.
Apollo the Selfish.
The episode with Apollo,
yeah.
Well,
but see, that's where you have to bring in, with things like this, you have to bring in the consideration of what is the author of the work trying to say.
Yeah.
If the goal is not to portray the mythology accurately, and if they are not claiming to portray it accurately, then it's less of an issue than if they're claiming to be an authority on it and they get everything wrong.
Yeah.
See, I always
to be fair, like, original Star Trek is very misotheist.
I was going to say, since we dumped into science fiction now with bit. Now, again, this is not supposed to be an accurate representation of mythology, because it's suggesting that you know what the sort of Greek mythology or whatever came from, you know, like a different culture altogether. I don't know how familiar people are with Battlestar Galactica. I mean, and there's so many religious undertones to that whole show. But you know, the you know, I don't want to give too much away, but the basically the gods of the gods of the 12 colonies are the Greek gods.
Of course they are.
And
shit, that's something.
I don't want to get. I don't want to give. If people haven't watched it, you see, I don't want to give spoilers to what it's suggesting at the end of it all. But But it's kind of weird because it's weird because it kind of like the sort of the race that are the enemies of the humans, the Cylons. They're monotheist. Yeah.
I should watch the show. One thing though, there's one thing that gets the trifecta of worst. It's bad on history, it's bad on religion, and it's bad on mythology. And we haven't mentioned it yet. 300.
That's not one I know. What's that?
That's
the film 300.
Yeah, it's based on Frank Miller's sort of proto-fascist wet dream of what Sparta was.
Yeah,
it's about the Battle of Thermopylae.
It's Sparta, but if it happened now.
No,
it's Sparta, but the Persians are it was written and made around the time America was really pissy with Iran, and it shows.
Okay.
I see. I know about that film.
Yes. The movie was released when we were really pissy with Iran. The graphic novel was, actually, America's always been pissy with Iran, so...
Yeah.
But the graphic novel was many years before that.
Yeah, in the 90s. But the film even more so makes it...
Both the film and the graphic novel are very homophobic, homoerotic, homofascism.
They're also
Googled
terrible on the polytheism.
I've seen chunks of that film. I just never knew the name of it, and that is a terrible, terrible thing.
It's Frank. And I will say, there are some comics Frank Miller has written which are absolutely brilliant. I mean, again, it's one of those things that you can sometimes appreciate the art when it's good, but he's written some crap as well. But obviously, 300 is supposed to be a retelling of Thermopylae.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's supposed to be, but
it leaves out all the work the Athenians did and all the work that the non-Spartan members of the army that was at Thermopylae.
And there were no auxiliaries shown, and who the hell, though, Leonidas would not have climbed that mountain, and what was that scene in the flame, what was all that about?
But then they did, in the films, I don't know if Frank Miller wrote the graphic novel for the sequel, because there was a sequel film that came out, but it focused on Salamis, and the main character in it was Themistocles. So that was more around, obviously, the Athenians. But
although I learned from something, I've not read the comic 300. I learned that in the film 300, the entire story around his wife and the fellow who was basically trying to harm her was not in the original comic. So that was that pure misogyny that bordered. There's one particular scene in 300 that really needs trigger warnings, and he tries to coerce her sexually as well as politically. Was not in the comics, and I think that says a lot about the director and about the writer of the screenplay that it was added in.
I'm pretty sure Frank Miller wrote the screenplay as well, didn't he? He tends to get involved in adaptations of his work like that.
Anyways, we can talk about Zack Snyder another time.
Yeah.
Now for my worst, so more well known of my worst would be the Chronicles of Narnia.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's literally just using it to proselytize. And second worst, and largely I'm mostly putting this as second worst because of issues I have with the work itself, so take that as you will, potentially take that with the entirety of Lot's Wife. And the Mither Mages series by Orson Scott Card.
Wow. Anything by him is just proselytizing Mormonism, isn't it?
Well, yeah, so the basic the the basic premise is the various pantheons of gods, where dynastic families of people from this magic planet.
Mm.
And
Yeah, that's
so,
Mormonism.
yeah. And so,
It
yeah.
sounds like someone watched The Godfather while they were high.
But yeah, like, pretty much all I had to say was Orson Scott Card and for why.
Fair.
I think for me, I think the best ones though are ones that don't make the mythos front and center.
Yeah.
They use
Yeah.
it to tell a story rather than
Yeah.
using a story to display the mythos. If that makes any sense.
I think that's why I chose the one that I said is the one I would consider best, purely and simply because it draws from it and it draws from it accurately.
Yeah.
But that's not the point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that that's a pretty, like, that kind of ties together, like, a lot of, pretty much everything that we had mentioned among the best is that it draws to tell its story without making it about, its depiction.
If we're talking also as well, I just want to make reference. There's a lot of it. I'm going to put it in the realms of a mythos, in the realms of a mythology.
Yeah.
A lot of Robin Hood stories are very good.
Ooh, Robin Hood stories are fun.
Yeah.
Because, yes, there are some terrible ones. And there are some good ones, but the good ones are the ones that tell the story and take elements of the folk tale. I don't think it's quite old enough to be called a mythology yet, but it's getting there.
It's it's possibly an urban mythology.
Yeah.
I will say it's a little bit dated now, but if anyone's ever gets a chance to watch the British 80s TV series Robin of Sherwood, that's well worth watching.
That's
even
the
BBC Robin Hood is quite good.
Since we're including things like Robin Hood, I will have to add something to my worst list.
Prince of Thieves, gotta be, isn't it?
No, it doesn't lift from Robin Hood. It lifts from Arthurian lore. But if if we're lifting from, if Robin Hood counts, Arthur counts.
Yeah, Arthurian lore is definitely a mythology.
Arthurian lore is absolutely mythology.
Yeah.
My least favorite bit about Arthurian mythology is the frequent inclusion of Morrigan Le Fay being the same as the Morrigan.
Yeah.
Oh, I hate that.
But so my worst so best in regards to including Arthurian, Connecticut Yankee.
No idea.
By Mark Twain, Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court.
Yeah.
Worst, Dragons in Our Midst, which no one here would probably know. It's basically like the Christian Harry Potter, and yes, I will do an episode on it sometime.
Okay.
Mind your blood pressure, dear.
It's not the that weird one that's Harry Potter's School of Miracles and whatever.
No. I call it the Christian Harry Potter. There aren't really any wizards or anything in it. It actually follows like human dragon hybrids.
Oh, that makes sense.
That sounds like it could be actually a really good concept, but the fact that you're saying it's Christian tells me it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much my view on it. If we're talking about media generally misrepresenting things, I mentioned earlier a lot of the shit you'll find in bookstores, and I held up one earlier, but my least favorite is this, and it was written by apparently a former office holder of the Pagan Confederation.
The what?
The Pagan Confederation.
No such thing.
It's an official organization.
Yeah, but
it's bullshit. And
yeah.
Let me read you their definition of paganism. What a pagan is. A pagan is someone who believes in a supreme being who is above, below, and all around us.
Excuse me?
What? They got
That's
what?
Platonism.
the thing is that's not only Platonism. They then
That's
talk about it as
monotheism.
if the other gods don't exist at all.
Mm-hmm.
You could possibly stretch it to include pantheism, but that's more
Maybe.
monotheism
And
than
that is-
anything else.
And the description of the author is former office holder of the Pagan Confederation UK.
Hmm.
Hands
Well,
up how
some-
many
some
pagans have
pagans
heard
might
of
believe
that
that.
organisation before.
Me, purely and simply because I've read several of their books and it's all bullshit.
Right.
So I
But
just thought I'd share that with you as an example of quite how bullshit it gets.
But yeah, I mean the first couple books are pretty good, but then once they actually start delving into Arthurian lore, it also gets really, really, really purity culture.
Oh, if we're talking about bad ones for mythologies, I'm going to say it. Dan Brown. Because let's be honest, that's just that's some form of fiction using Christian mythology and
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Let's just be honest. Dan Brown, anything he writes is trash. I'm sorry, it is trash.
Yeah.
Now,
I'm not a fan, as you can tell.
I used to be, but then I grew up.
I feel I should point out that just because something is Christian or because it's some other religion doesn't make it a bad work of art necessarily.
No,
no,
yeah.
no, I'm just saying that Dan Brown is a
I don't
bad
want people to
example
think
of
that's what we're saying.
representing.
Yeah,
No,
I think
We're talking
the
about bad
C.S.
examples
Narnia,
of
Yeah.
the Narnia books are great.
Yeah.
I don't agree with them being used to proselytize Christianity to children, but as an adult reading those stories, I really like them a lot.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, and
For
actually,
reasons
I will
independent of the religion.
a really good use of specifically Christian mythology would actually be C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good book. Yeah.
A good, not very well known use of. I'm going to say the Hellenic Afterlife because it's sort of the River Styx and things like that. Is Houseboat on the Styx. It's a book you can get on Project Gutenberg by what's his name? Anyway, it's basically it's a thought, but again, it's one of those that takes a concept and uses it to tell a story rather than bases a story on it, because it's what would happen if all these famous names met in an afterlife, and the afterlife just happens to be a boat parked on the Styx.
And
that's what it is. So it's
but yeah, so yes, a lot of my examples were, Christian literature, but it's not because I have anything against Christian literature. Christian literature, especially modern Christian literature, tends to suffer from what I call the Silver Age effect, in that it's so heavily censored, it's hard to get good stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why my best and worst were both. Neither of them are going to include Christian stuff, because I think the best stuff is going to include things from other cultures that are done well, and the worst stuff is going to have even less known cultures done terribly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think my just to in kind of roundup is, don't claim to be an authority. If you do, you're going to do it badly no matter what you do, because there is no authority. If you do it respectfully, and don't try and retell the myth. Use the myth to tell your own story.
Yeah,
that seems to be the three things that you have to do something that we all seem to deem as being a good representation.
Yeah.
Well,
Closing
in that case, Marvel's Thor would be good.
My kind of closing thoughts on this would be that within, using mythology is great in media, and it's lovely to see it. But like as you said, the general consensus does seem to be don't retell the old stories, create something new using them as a bit of a backdrop. And don't claim that this is how it was, claim that this is your artistic interpretation of it.
Yeah. And Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to sum up on this. There's very good uses and bad uses. I'm not maybe because I'm no longer a polytheist, I don't get as head up about a lot of stuff. But I do think, especially as we pointed out earlier, especially when we're dealing with active cultures, that I wish there would be maybe a little bit more just respect that the mythologies are treated with at times, rather than I mean, I don't mind creative license, but I think I don't really like lazy use of mythology. That I guess that's about it. But
yeah,
if you're going to use creative license, say you're using it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Bob?
My final thoughts would be that for this entire conversation, that the idea has been running through the back of my mind that theologically, for people who are polytheists, the gods, as somebody said earlier, the gods have always inspired stories about themselves. And probably the gods change over time, as all things do. So it's not necessarily bad to portray them in a, quote, inaccurate way, so long as you are using the mythology to tell your own story, as we've all been saying. So I don't get mad at the fact that Marvel's Thor has blonde hair, for example, or that it's nothing like Norse mythology, because that isn't the point of the Marvel movies. And the other takeaway for me is to treat respectfully the mythology of cultures who are in the minority and who are still a going concern. So don't turn Native American spirituality into the villain or the evil curse, because that helps perpetuate real world racism. But it's okay to critique Christian mythology, or it's more okay to critique Christian mythology and make it the bad guy because they're in charge. So it's punching up.
Yeah.
So when you're doing mythological representation, don't punch down, punch up if you feel the need to punch at religion at all.
First rule of comedy.
Yeah.
Always punch up.
And with that, we'll go ahead and move to Schilling. We'll start with Sam and go, Sam, and we'll start with Sam and end with Scummer, seeing as how Jeff has something that since we're going to be wanting to funnel viewers directly to Jeff anyways.
Okay.
So
Jeff should go first, I think. If he has to leave first, he should probably go first.
I probably will. Yeah, actually, that's not a bad shout, because I am probably going to have to jump over.
Yeah,
okay. On my channel, in about 15 minutes or so, obviously I'll be waiting for this stream to finish. Please feel free to come over to my channel, Godless Scummer. We're having a little, just a informal kind of stream today, as tomorrow it happens to be my birthday.
Happy birthday.
I'm going to have a little birthday stream, and feel free to come along and bring your own beer, kind of thing. So I will have to jump now because I'm going to have to get set up for that and start sending invites out. So, but thanks for having me on, Ring. Always love coming on here, and I think this has been a really it's been quite an interesting discussion today. So I'll jump off now. See you later.
All right, chuck us a link with you, Jeff.
Yeah, I've I've just got to see who's coming in first, Sam, or I'll try and get you in now. I've got.
Yeah.
So, okay. Cheers.
Well, happy birthday.
Yep. So, Hissy, got anything? Or Noodle, sorry.
Noodle. Yeah, you can still call me Hissy. I'm on Twitter. I have 2 different Twitter accounts, Main and Fandom. If you follow me on Fandom, expect a lot of not safe for work stuff. I also now have a Redbubble store, so you can check that out, and I will drop a link in the chat for that. If there's anything you like, we have #HissyFit. We have some merch for that. And my profile picture, which is the profile picture I use in my Fandom, which is a snake with a book and a quill. You can see it on the chat as well. You can get merch with that on it that I've been working on, and probably a few other things once I get fully up and running. So I'm trying to get Ring to the UK, so every little helps if you want merch. I write fan fiction. Dead Dove, Do Not Eat. Again, very not safe for work. Be careful. Pretty much that's me anyway. Other than that, everything else I do either with Jeff or with Ring. We are planning on picking up the Asterix streams probably next week. So keep an eye on that. And it will either be on mine or Jeff's channel, and we will put out information on Twitter when we have something more solid planned.
And Sam?
So I kind of show up everywhere. I also show up on like Jen's Little Corner and Jeff's channel and various places, but I have my own channel. And in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be releasing a video that's just... Okay, so minority identities are not quirky. They're fucking exhausting. Just kind of talking about minority identities and the issues with tokenizing people and why it is that people always seem to feel oppressed, even though they're not, they're the majority, and then the minorities that they're claiming are oppressing them are not. That sort of shit. So that's coming out in the next couple of weeks on my YouTube channel, and I scream into the void on Twitter.
Does the void ever scream back?
Occasionally. usually in the form of a shit post from another pagan or atheist, given that's who most of the people on my Twitter are.
Cool. Yeah. And Bob?
I'm Bob of the Old Ways. You can find me under that name on both YouTube and Instagram. I'm on Twitter at OldWaysBob. And my YouTube channel is brand new, I should say not brand new. I've relaunched it. I tried it a few years ago, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, so I stopped. But somehow I managed to gain 157 subscriptions anyway, and they're all still with me, despite the new channel, which is doing reaction videos, because I love reaction videos. So that's what I'm focusing on. I will occasionally do commentary on political or religious issues that are topical, but I want to build an audience around doing reaction videos from an explicitly pagan perspective, because I want to help normalize polytheistic and animistic faiths, because I think that will be to the detriment of civilization as a whole going forward.
Yeah.
So I'm not ambitious.
Yeah. Well, you've only got 2 reaction videos up. They're still they're good.
Mm-hmm.
And you do have more subscribers than me.
Yeah. Just a handful though.
Yeah.
I'm already getting stupid focused comments.
Oh, are you?
I screen all of my comments, so none of them go up immediately. And I've gotten 2 so far from, I just delete them and block the person.
That's the sign you're starting something that could get decently big then.
Yeah. So somebody left a nasty comment like, why would you want to be pagan if you are standing in support of all the degenerates who want to see you dead because you're a white man, type of comment.
Oh, okay.
So I just deleted it and it's like, bye, you're banned.
That brand of focused. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to say that sounds very focused.
Yeah.
But most of the comments I've gotten so far are positive and supportive. So I'm going to keep letting those comments through, and anything that's racist or in any way bigoted is just not going to get through.
Yeah.
So thanks for having me.
Yes.
It's
And
been excellent.
Bob's channel is linked in the description. So, go check it out after Jeff's stream. There are only a couple reactions, and they're, both like under a half hour long. So it's a very quick, easy watch.
Yeah, and the ones coming up will be even shorter. I'm only reacting to the TV show Vikings right now, and I upload new videos every Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific. I'm going to branch out into reacting to other things, but I want to see what kind of audience I attract first, and then get feedback from them about what I should react to.
Yeah.
And Sam just put his channel, or their channel, I'm sorry, in chat.
Any pronouns.
Yeah. And
I will drop that in the main chat.
yeah,
Yeah,
Sam's
our private
channel
chat.
is in the main chat and will be in the description.
Cheers. I've avoided focused so far, but I have a funny mix in my audience of atheists, pagans, and Christians.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know some of my in real life friends who are Christians watch it, and I always throw food for thought at them.
Well, all three of those communities have very toxic elements as well. I guess all communities do.
Yeah. I've thus far somehow avoided all drama within all three of those communities.
What you want to do is get all three communities together and watch the fireworks if you want drama.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know.
I've only been really like tangential to any kind of drama. I've tended to avoid drama as well, but I tend to be like invisible to trolls because I'm a tiny.
I may have some personal drama to divulge to Noodle and Ring in a couple of weeks. So we'll see what happens over Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as always, I do secular D&D on Saturdays. And of course, Media Musings on Sundays. I think next week we'll be doing You'll Shoot Your Eye Out. We'll see how Noodle feels about talking about A Christmas Story and American gun culture.
Yeah. I have to say, A Christmas Story is the only traditional Christmas movie that I actually like, with the exception of some versions of A Christmas Carol.
I imagine there are thoughts on American gun culture from Noodle.
Yes.
Tiny bit.
Yeah.
Tiny bit.
And eventually, sometime soon, I will be getting around to my Dungeons and Divinity, because I'm kind of stretching the concept because Twitter voted for me to do Dr. Faustus.
As a D&D adventure?
Well, yeah, on my channel, for those who aren't aware, because I so rarely do edited content because of my work schedule. I have something of a series called Dungeons and Divinity, where I take a look at God's word through the lens of the devil's game. I take Bible characters and stat them out as it and go through their story as if it was a D&D campaign.
That's fantastic. I love that.
Yeah.
I have to say that's, I mean, I would love to see a D&D adaptation of biblical mythology. They do it with all the other mythologies, but they keep their hands off of Judeo-Christian stuff.
Oh,
for
yeah.
obvious reasons, I think. But it would be interesting to see an independent, like a third-party person do that. Adapt the world of the Bible as a role-playing, as a D&D setting.
That person would then have to go live underground.
The thing with D&D is that rather than involve Judeo-Christian stuff in other religions, they take Judeo-Christian principles and apply it to other religions.
Yeah, one of the videos I'm planning on doing in the future is how D&D does polytheism wrong.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Especially since you have clerics of individual religions who are supposed to not get along with clerics of other religions, apparently.
Yeah.
But, yeah, like, for instance, I ran the Journey of the Wise Man as a D&D session. I also did an Easter special where I ran the Passion.
Oh wow, that would be interesting.
That's
But there's a lot of a rich vein of material for D&D in the Bible. You got dragons, you got giants, magic, all kinds of epic.
Yeah, though, most of them are like kind of character build ish videos. There's one on Elijah, there's one on Samson, there's one on Elisha.
Let's be honest, the level 12. Let's be honest, the level 12 paladin running off into the desert to fight the big bad all on his own for 40 days is right up D&D's alley.
Yeah.
Yeah. That pretty much.
Now that I think of it, I think there was during an earlier edition of D&D, what's called the 3.5 edition, I think some third-party company did put out a supplement based on the Old Testament.
3.5 had so many supplements that wouldn't surprise me. Like, not as many as AD&D had, but still a stupid amount.
Yeah.
But, yeah, if you are actually, hold on.
See, now I'm just imagining Adam as a cleric. The fallen cleric.
Adam and Eve would not make good clerics because obviously wisdom was the dump stat, at least pre-Apple.
Yeah.
It was more a comment that there'd be a bad cleric and then there'd be a cleric who had lost their deity.
Yeah.
I think they'd work better as barbarians. Because they're, they're uncivilized.
Maybe.
Being the first people.
I can sort of see an argument for, like, barbarian with, like, maybe a level or two in paladin. Such that they can then have the Oathbreaker thing.
I think Adam would need to have a few levels in Ranger.
Probably.
Yeah, Ranger's a better choice, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can probably make an argument that Cain is a warlock.
Okay, we are massively off topic, and I know just waiting to start.
Sorry.
Well, not really. We're talking about the depiction of mythology in media, so that counts.
So it's not in the description, but I did put the my playlist of all my Dungeons and Divinity videos.
I'll check those out
in the comment below. And with that, we'll go to taglines. Sam, do you have any?
Communication is key.
Bob?
My tagline that I end all my videos with is, remember that what is best in life is to crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and engage in discourse with the women.
I like that.
Yeah.
Which is a Conan the Barbarian reference, by the way.
Yeah.
And Noodle?
And as always, from me, take care, be good, and if you can't be good, be careful.
And remember, indoctrination is a hell of a drug.
Yep.